Jedi business, go back to your drinks.
Welcome, welcome, all are welcome. Old fans, new fans, thank you for joining another episode of Jedi Business. With me here today again is Darth Zartan. Polly, how are you?
Hey, good. How about yourself, man?
Well, honestly, as you know, I've been a little under the weather this past week. Uh, I've been home from work, sick from work, but I guess I'm doing a little better. I'm not sure, but
Well, hopefully this lifts your spirits a little bit.
yeah. Okay, well, thank you for joining me. Appreciate it. And we're here to talk Acolyte episode 6. Interesting episode. But before we get into that, we have a little Star Wars in the news this week. I wanted to bring up. I don't know if you saw this, but it appears that Denny Villeneuve, or how do you pronounce his name?
Good news?
Yeah, the actually awesome director. I've liked almost all his stuff, but he obviously is on top of the world right now with Dune 2, and they announced his new project as coming out on December 18th, 2026. Now, why is that important? Because there's rumors it could be Dune 3, and that date also is the same date as the Rey movie is supposed to come out. So now the question is, can both those franchises come out on the same day? Two, will one of them move? And three, would we ever in our lifetimes actually be able to say that it's probably Star Wars that's going to move? I don't know. What did you watch that thing I sent you, and what do you think?
I did. I'd still like to find out exactly what is the movie. I mean, if it's not that, then obviously that changes things potentially. But if it is Dune 3, which might line up with what we've heard, since he said he did want to take a little bit of a break, but I wouldn't think he'd want to do another movie and then do that. That would almost be like a 6-year gap, probably. So anyhow, if in fact it is, I think probably can it coexist? I think it can. I just don't think the movie going audience cares about it. Like, in other words, that kind of a atmosphere, like maybe they might have 30 years ago. So I think fans would go see both. I mean, I don't necessarily see them doing repeat viewings again and again and again and again. And the way that movies come to local media, through streaming platforms and stuff, I just don't think it's as important. I don't know. I'm not a Hollywood insider. Maybe it is. It probably is a little bit of an ego thing. Maybe they just thought they'd push the issue if it is in fact Dune 3 and see if Disney wants to move off their date. But um, the one
Star
thing,
Wars moving.
yeah, no, I think the one thing that
It's
is,
like everyone always gets out of the way. When Star Wars used to name a date, everyone moved out of the way. But I think the fact that that's even a discussion, because you're right, we don't know if it's Dune 3. But I think the fact that it's even a discussion has just shown how, and I don't want to be one of these Star Wars bashers, but it just seems how far the franchise has fallen under Kathleen Kennedy.
yeah.
Because it's
No,
like, how
I,
how would we ever even discuss that? That it's like, okay, Star Wars has to move for a movie.
well,
Even Avatar
it's
got out of the way.
Well, besides sort of an ego clash, between the two studios, just look at it from a financial standpoint. Both in the past, both studios would have basically said, "Look, let's do this in the best interest of both, so that we can both make money off this, right?" Instead of both of them sort of competing against each other, having the opportunity, because you're really looking at the same audience, right? So, yeah, you could argue there may be a little more in one than the other, but it's primarily the same audience, and so I think it would be smarter financially for them to probably do it separately. But again, to your point, I think it is a different world, and because it's the Ray movie, correct? That's already been plugged in.
Well, because there's two. Well, I mean that's another bad thing about Kennedy. How many how many times can you announce a movie and not put it out? I mean, we could go through a list, but just to bring up one, Patty Jenkins' uh,
X-wing.
X-Wing movie. It's like I was hyped for that, and then it was gone, and now it's back, and now it's supposedly gone again. And it's like that's just one among many. And then they announced Ray was coming next for sure, and then there was kind of backlash to that, and all of a sudden, the Mandalorian movie's coming out next. So
Yeah, and that's just it. This we could all be, and I've seen some of the discussion on other platforms, but I think at the end of the day, what you have is a situation where really we really don't know what either movie is going to end up being, right? Because even the start, we've talked about it whether or not it's a Dune movie, but what if the Star Wars movie ends up either getting moved just because they logistically had to because it's not ready yet, or they've just changed their mind and it's a different Star Wars movie. So I think it's still a moving target. But I guess if as soon as we know for sure that there are two movies being released on the same day, maybe we come back and have this discussion a year or two from now, because that's
You're right.
that's 2026. That's still a
Right.
few.
I mean, you're right about that. It's just I really wanted to talk about more of the fact of thinking that if that was true, it was a Dune 3, and if it was the Ray movie, and one had to move, because you're right, both of them are the same audience, so they're both going to go see it regardless. But just for that initial pop of who's going to have the big opening weekend, the fact that even say, well, Star Wars, we'd even think that it would be Star Wars that's moving. It's just weird. It's just a different
Well,
time.
one bad thing I think with what's come after Disney acquired the whole empire is, pun intended, is this idea that I think it's been watered down. And so I think people look at it. It's not as, in other words, unless you grew up with your parents and your grandparents, generations watching it, and you were a kid and you grew up in the household that loved Star Wars. If you're just a casual moviegoer, or maybe you're familiar with a few of the movies or the property, but you haven't watched everything, it's probably not that important for you it's just not that big of an issue, perhaps, as previous generations. I think it's been watered down. We've seen too many. They did the same thing with Marvel. I mean, they've gone overboard, I think, on that too. It's kind of watered down the quality of what's been released.
Don't even get me started on that. I was just rewatching uh, Winter Soldier last night, and I'm sitting there watching, like, damn, it's like these were so good.
Right. Well,
But
it's
anyways,
yeah,
anyways, okay, so let's that's our Star Wars in the news, just things that pop up. But let's bring it back to once again the Acolyte
yeah,
season 1, episode 6. Now, I was re-listening to what we talked about last week, and I guess if someone were to hear me say that, they'd kind of come under the impression that I was not liking it because I had so many criticisms of it. But overall, I am liking it. I find I find that the stuff that I have criticism of it is not making me like it to the point where I'm not interested. I know you said you probably wouldn't rewatch it, and would I rewatch it? I rewatch it just because we're doing these podcasts, and
right, right.
I like to watch it fresh, and I'll rewatch it and take some notes. But will I rewatch it again? I don't know. I doubt it. But I'm just enjoying it for what it is. Like I said, I come in the time when you got a lot of different comics, Star Wars comics, and they weren't always the best either, but I would read them. But this episode, I actually liked better than the last episode. Everyone hyped up because of the action from last episode, but this episode, they actually gave us some character growth. At least they talked, and we got a little bit more in depth in what the character. Whether if you don't like the characters, not liking the characters, this probably episode's not going to win you over. But if you're at least wanting to know more about the characters, at least it was a talking episode, but at least we got, I don't know, we got a little bit more characterization than it seems Disney puts into their shows.
Yeah, I think that's fair, in terms of more characterization. But the only problem for me now in this last step, well, two problems I think that are overarching for me, and one is they keep introducing new twists. It's kind of like new plot twists, and it's like you're in episode 6. You've got 2 episodes left. You should be wrapping up plot points. You shouldn't be introducing new ones. If you want to get back into a character's motivations, that's one thing. But I have this sneaky suspicion now. It looks like they're going to flip flop acolytes. I don't
I
see.
hope not, but you're
I,
right. It
I
certainly looks like that, but it's just,
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I still question whether or not May's going to actually sort of again see the light. It's a slight pun intended again there, but I just think that I see it more for the other sister, right? Osha basically sort of turning dark, and I thought, again, you're starting to introduce new things, and it's like you should be wrapping things up. If her whole idea, she was brought there sort of as a, obviously now it's not so much she was brought there as a hostage or as a prisoner, but more as I'm going to bring you over to my side. You can see how he's talking to her, kind of like a Palpatine would have done, right, in terms of
Yeah,
Darth
he
Sidious. But
manipulated her.
yeah, and it's like, I guess you could say, well, gee, this is 100 years ago, so none of this takes place. It's all fresh. This is kind of the first iteration, and I just think that's just not, that's a kind of a cop out, I guess. I just think I so the other thing is it, like I said, it's the flip flop of the roles of the two sister characters, that sort of flip flopping the acolyte role, and then there's also this, you're introducing all these new plot points, and it's like, look, that's a little bit different than saying, hey, let's give you, for instance, well, so what was so bad that Saul did so many years ago that apparently,
Okay, okay,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
all
you're
the,
right.
it's like, come on, just
But they've been hinting that something happened. Well, hang on. Before we get into that, let's pick up where the episode, because we'll get into that. Don't worry, we'll get
all
into
right,
that. But okay, so basically, they one thing they the show has got clowned on is that every time they show a planet, they show the name. And
right.
they've showed Coruscant, and it's like you have people online saying it's like, well, like we don't know where the Jedi Temple is. Why are they going to keep showing we're on Coruscant? And I only bring that up because May wakes up and they pull a unknown planet instead of telling us the planet. Is that planet, or I mean, is that place where she's at? Is that supposed to be the same island or the same planet as Luke on that
Well,
one?
it's the first thing that popped in my mind. See, it's funny. It's funny you say that, and it ties into another point I was going to bring up, which is, rather than feeling like a sort of an original trilogy, even a prequel vibe to it, this all now feels more like somehow it's a direct connection. It's got me thinking it's more of a sequel vibe. In other words,
They're
you know,
pushing it toward the sequel trilogy.
yeah, yeah, and I just think, oh, okay, I see. So, which I, wasn't a huge fan of to begin with. So you could argue, sure, that maybe Jade's my opinion, but again, it kind of feels like you're trying to make Shinola out of shit. It's kind of like,
Yeah, yeah.
the way, you already,
They're trying to link it to the sequels, both with the Kylo Ren theme last week and
correct,
this
correct.
island this week, and yeah,
Correct. And for me, the again, I guess a third thing, but it's connected to the whole role reversal of the acolytes. Of course, you could see that helmet was something she was going to put on her head, and she did at the end. And I just thought, oh, here we go again. So I don't, like I said, I mean, I'm going to finish watching out the series. Like you, I've followed things that maybe were either more or less interesting just because it was the property, but I can be more critical of it. And then, like I said, that may mean I do repeated viewings. Like a good example, this Fourth of July holiday, a few channels have on cable have had like Star Wars marathons along with other marathons. I'll stop, in my day, if I know, yeah, if I happen to be flipping the channels, I'll watch maybe 20 minutes or whatever. But then there are, like, for instance, the sequel trilogy. I don't make any special effort. Once I see it on the guide, I just keep scrolling. So, I mean, it's probably going to be the same way with this if it ever shows that.
yeah.
It's
With
like,
the sequel, we got to talk about that because like yeah. Anyway, let's not get into that right now. But anyway, so this episode basically has three storylines going. The first one, obviously, with with Osha waking up on
yeah,
the island with the stranger.
right.
Then we got obviously Soul and May, and then we got the Jedi's. I want to get her name right. I wrote it down somewhere. Venestra, I believe her name is.
Right.
Yeah, Vernestra. But anyway, so we go from Osha waking up, and then we go to Soul, which I just want to again, say how much I'm enjoying him as a Jedi. Just it was just you could feel the emotion when he's like, "My whole team is dead." But then he says something like, "We were ambushed. Somebody knew we were coming." So is that a hint that they were betrayed by someone, or it just happened to be a happenstance that you know uh, the stranger was there, and it just I noticed that he was showing a lot of emotion that a lot of Jedi's don't really show all the time. You know, he was.
Here's just a random thought. I have a suspicion that Venestra is part of that cult or whatever, and somehow um, she sent him there along with the party and was hoping they'd all be killed. I don't know. That's just I
Interesting, but you know, I was reading somewhere that Venestra actually is in the High Republic books
okay.
as a child. So I don't know. I don't know how that would work, but I've actually read that you know, the High Republic stuff they're doing with the comics.
Right, right.
I've heard that she actually comes from there, but she had hair and she was a child. But I do notice the tattoos on her head, and I don't know. I've been trying to see whether they match with the tattoos of the witch coven, like what you were saying. So
Yeah.
I had thought of that too, like okay, well maybe there was something more to it. But I
Well, you
really
know, because she basically was very secretive about this. That's why even the young Jedi that had approached her in the temple, which, by the way, again, another poor choice in acting selection. I just didn't care for the way that actor came off. Again, I don't know if that's the way he was directed or is that just poor acting. I don't know,
it
but
was like
it.
he was like the what would you call it? He was like the Jimmy Olsen of.
There you go. That's a good, and which again is completely contrary. My whole idea, I don't think it's changed in 100 years because the Jedi go back thousands of years. But I don't think in 100 years they would come off more like Jimmy Olsen as opposed to having a little more confidence. That's why I appreciated more of Jackie's character. She kind of to me gave off the vibe of a Jedi, you know, as opposed to this kid who just was like, "Gee, Terwillikers, Miss Master Vernestra, we've got this issue." You know, it's like I don't know. It just didn't really exude much confidence for a Jedi, in my opinion. And again, that could be more directing. It could be just his acting ability. I didn't like it, but
Well,
uh,
Venestra's getting a lot of complaints because they're saying why did when she first did the sent Solo on the mission, why didn't she inform the High Council and everything? But my point is I don't like her as a character, but I'm liking her as a character. That doesn't make sense, but here's what I mean. Here's what I mean by that. I don't like her character, but I like what they're doing with her because you know, even when they first show her, she's talking to a senator about uh, how the Jedi are being, there's something going on with the Senate, and I really feel what they're trying to show, or even if they're not trying to show, what it's coming through is, by the time of the Phantom Menace, the Jedi were so intertwined with the Senate, and and they almost like they lost their way. Um, you know, they lost like what a lot of what Qui Gon and even Count Dooku was saying in the Tales of the Jedi, or whatever that show was, where they showed that basically the Jedi were becoming too political and
mm,
too involved. There's like somebody was asked the question: would Qui Gon, if he had lived, would he have been a general in the war? I don't think so. There's no way. I
I
really
don't know.
feel
It's
that
hard to
Vanessa's
say.
showing that how the beginnings of how the Jedi are losing their way. They're not focused on the Force and what's important. She's almost doing a Game of Thrones, like in the sense of dealing with not telling the High Council, being a little underhanded in the sense of, okay, well, how is the Senate, uh the Senate might look at us bad and stuff like that. And it's just, to me,
Well,
that's a good way. It's showing the beginning of their fall.
Well, do you get that as her basically trying to curry favor with certain senators or her avoiding the Senate because she knows that there are pitfalls there? What do you think that?
I just think it's just showing that, um, just like with any kind of power and any kind of stuff like that, you it's like no politician goes in. Well, I'd say 99% of the politicians that go into politics don't go to be corrupt, but you get corrupted. You get corrupted by the bribes and all that. And I'm not saying Jedi are being bribed. I'm just saying, you know, it's the Jedi Order. If you, especially if you read the older books, that it was about dealing with the Force and life with the Force. It wasn't about becoming, even if they're protectors of the Republic, they're not. They shouldn't be the police of the Republic.
Mm,
Same way that Dooku went to get. Dooku and Qui-Gon went against that senator when he was trying to, get his kid back or whatever it was. You remember that? There was a cartoon. I can't remember what it was. Uh,
Oh no, that was Tales of the
yeah,
Tales of the Jedi.
Tails.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember that? Remember that
Oh
episode?
yeah.
Okay. Now, if Dooku had been just like anyone else, he would have backed the senator no matter what. It's like
Well,
I'm just saying. I feel like the Jedi lost their way. That's why they couldn't sense Palpatine. They're in. When May says our ability to feel the Force has been diminished, I just feel that they lost their way. They became too political. They became too. You know, there's a reason why you should have
well,
separation of church and state.
how about this? Maybe that was said now in retrospect, which may be an accurate statement, but maybe that was more due to not because maybe the Sith were sort of clouding what was going on with the in terms of how the Jedi were processing relations with the Senate. It might have more to do with the fact that it really they felt conflicted because their emotions maybe were more at play, and their own personal interests. Of some maybe were swayed by money, if that had a role or credits, I
Money
guess.
or power,
Yeah, well, right. So
control.
maybe that's what was clouding their vision more than one individual. In that case, it would have been Darth Sidious who was actually trying to cloud their. It could have been a combination too. In
Which
other
is what
words,
I thought this series was going to be about, the beginning of the corruption of the Jedi. Because let's be honest, it's like the Jedi by the time of Phantom Menace, I there's a reason why they fell. It wasn't just because Anakin turned. I mean, they were duped right under their noses. It's like they should have known. And it's
well,
just
it'd be curious. I don't know.
I feel that's why I feel Vernestra showing that she's just in her actions. She's showing like why should she care what how the Senate views the Jedi Order anyway? So
Well,
that's just my opinion. Why I like her, but I don't like her character. But I
I get,
like the
I
way
get
she's
it.
doing.
Well, but it would be interesting to, again, this is one of those many questions. Of course, he might sort of rebuff it because he has no hand in the franchise anymore. But Lucas, I'd be curious to see what his thoughts were as far as the buildup. In other words, what had in his mind taken place prior to the prequels to get to that point where the Jedi were either clouded or just didn't have a clear vision of what was going on. I would be curious because it'd be interesting to compare that with what they're doing now. Was that something that was taken from his ideas, or was this kind of a little different direction? I don't know. I don't know.
But anyways, I like that. And then she's dealing with the senators, and then Jimmy Olsen comes in, and he's all like, "Well, how did you know Soul was there?" And she's like, "I sent him." So she's obviously doing stuff which confirmed from before when she didn't want to inform the High Council.
Right.
She's obviously doing stuff on the side, which like, should a Jedi be doing that? No. A lot of people criticize her for that. It's like, well, a Jedi wouldn't do that. It's like, yeah, well, that's the point. They're trying to show
Right. Right.
Jedi becoming. Anyways, so I'm liking that. I agree with the what you said about the Jimmy Olsen character. I just. But
Well, but
anyway,
again,
okay, so we got three basic stories going on, and um,
I'm sorry, just to jump in real quick. I know you weren't looking for an answer, but now that I thought about it while we were talking, I think Qui-Gon might have even sided with Dooku. I mean, he's obviously shown that he was a little bit
he wouldn't have,
sympathetic.
if he found out he was with Sidious. No, but you're right. Before Dooku fell, he might have. You're
Right.
right.
Well, because I thought somewhere I thought I heard or read somewhere, maybe it was in Attack of the Clones, that whole line when Dooku's interrogating Kenobi, and I thought he had said or alluded to, maybe it could have been a cut scene, something about like, I had hoped that your master would have still been around. He might have been more. I'm just paraphrasing, but
Yeah,
basically,
yeah. No, I know
right.
what you're talking about. Yeah.
So it makes me think that maybe if obviously that was in an alternate universe or they had carried through with that character, who knows? It might have been a little different scenario. It might have been him and Dooku against the Republic. Anyhow, we're getting off track. I know you want to get back to the episode. So
No, but you're right because I'm saying it kind of goes into what we're talking about, how it's showing the corruption of I don't know if that's a good word, corruption, but the I guess yeah, corruption of the Jedi, because like even even in the Clone Wars they dealt with it a little bit should the Jedi be doing this? I know Ahsoka went through a lot of that too. It's like, well, am I a Jedi or am I a warrior?
Right.
It's not necessarily the same thing. But anyways, okay, getting back to the show. So this is what's funny. Okay, so Osha wakes up, she goes outside, and of course there's Smilo Ren, the stranger. He's getting naked,
Yeah.
and it it just seems silly because okay, someone else brought this up. I didn't think of this, so I'm not. But I'm just saying. Okay, so they got Kylo Ren with his shirt off in the sequel trilogy. Then they got Yord, you know,
Oh,
he's
that's
basically
right.
bare chested, and
Yeah.
now we got this guy. So they're saying, okay, why is it okay for the female gaze, but you do anything with the male gaze, suddenly it's like it's taboo.
Well, and it does feel a little bit like what would you call not soft porn, but like it's kind of it's gratuitous, right?
Yeah.
It just feels like okay. What? So I thought he was going to say something like a smart aleck comment, like do you like what you see, or I yeah, something stupid like that. But it does feel, and maybe and she could have jumped back with, well, your lightsaber's a little short or something like that. But I could go on all day. But point is that it's more of a distraction. I'm not a female. I'm not a woman, so I could only guess. I mean, are they excited by that,
Oh my gosh, dude, it's all over Twitter. It's
or
crazy. It's like,
or does it? For me, as I'm trying to watch the show, it becomes more of a distraction, not a I got to see what happens here. No, I'm not. I don't care about that. I'm more focused. Stick to the story, right? And
well, it's
maybe this.
I'm not here saying we need women bearing their breasts or anything. I'm not trying to imply that at all, and it doesn't bother me. But I'm just saying you can't. It's like it's so funny. It's like you can't have uh, sexy women characters just even fully clothed. You can't even
Right.
have that without there being an outcry. But yet the other way is okay. I just found that funny, especially since online, you know, you have all these women Star Wars fans like, well, I'm part of the dark side now.
See. Yeah. I, again, it becomes more of a distraction in a show like this, especially. To me, they've still got ground to cover, especially if you're introducing new concepts or new plot points. It's like, to me, there could have been a little different way of conveying what he was trying to do without getting into that territory. Because, again, if you're trying to wrap things up, which they should be, then that doesn't necessarily further the conversation, doesn't move the plot point along necessarily. Just to show, a skin flick kind of in a sense. There's just a few scenes there. I'm like, well, whatever. But
Star Wars
that's
After Dark.
obviously a directorial direction decision. So they've done it a few times, so obviously it's
Well,
important to the director.
they make a big deal about it being directed by women, so.
There you go. There you go.
But anyways, okay. Beyond that, he's obviously a manipulator. We do find out that he was a Jedi at one time. So I know you said you didn't particularly like that. It seemed to be retreading old territory with him trying to manipulate her, but the way he's doing it, the way he's talking to her, as far as how there's other ways to access the Force by emotion, by anger. You think they're doing a pretty good job of him doing that with her, per se?
I think so. I mean, in terms of how he's conveying it, again, I'm not a big fan of how they built the character up. I'm not a big fan of the actor that was cast in that role. But putting all that aside, if you just listen to the dialogue and kind of where he's headed, I think it's, to me, that the sound of it sounds convincing. But again, I question, and this is something that came up. I think there's been discussion on this too, but it's just like with the I call it now a new coven of witches, or that basically the group where the girls came from. Some people were all up in arms, I guess, because they thought, well, they're not even using the Force, or they're claiming not. Hey, 30 years ago, that was introduced in the Zahn trilogy with the Dathomir witches, right? Which later they reintroduced again during the Clone Wars, and they became a little bit more popular. And obviously, we've seen them again in the Ahsoka series. My point is, it's not a new concept. Obviously, they seem to be tapping into the Force, but we also have to understand that some people are in that universe are probably using it or tapping into it without actually calling it that. They, if if it's a universe that's that big, there are going to be people that aren't necessarily associated with Jedi or Sith. But now, of course, that all kind of goes down the tubes because he's already announced that he was a Jedi training at some point. So obviously he's aware of it. But again, I just question, how some of the plots unfolded. But as far as how he conveyed the, oh, I'm going to try and turn her to the dark side in a sense. Yeah, they did a decent enough job in the last episode with the dialogue.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. The
Yeah.
way he's kind of, you could see him pulling her, and then he pulls a Palpatine, strike me down. He's trying to get to that anger. So I thought it was a pretty good job. Like I said, you saw this coming from left field, how he's going to try to obviously. But I hope she doesn't fall. I think that would be silly. It doesn't seem right with her character that. But what's another thing that's weird about him? He seems to know a lot about. He seems to know a lot about stuff. I don't know if it's going to end up being bad writing that he knows what we know because we see the show. She talks about you killed Yor, and he goes, "Yeah, a guy who turned you in." When I was like, "How would he know that?"
Yeah,
There's no way they would have known that. How does he know so much?
I don't think for a show like this to be greenlit, it's not as if all of a sudden in the last 2 episodes the script writing is going to get dramatically improved. I think this is just a sign of what's been going on throughout the whole series, which is just poor writing, and then poor execution, trying to carry through some of the scenes and develop some of the characters. But it would make perfect sense to me. One, if in fact OSHA switches. One, because hey, it's a twist, and two, it obviously would lead into a sequel series, right? So for them, that's their in. That's their in to set up a sequel series, I guess.
Well, she had the showrunner Leslie Headland I heard she has talked about she had plans for season 3 and 4, 2 and 3, but whether that comes across or not, I don't know. But like I said, he did reveal he was a Jedi, and then he does mention the power of 2, so he must have some Sith knowledge if he's talking about unless it's a well-known concept by that time. I don't know the rule of 2, the power of 2.
Like what did they call it? Like a duology, like with Rey and Kylo. Yeah. I don't know. Hard to say. I'm curious. I don't even know if ratings are quite a thing nowadays, or how that's even tracked, since people are watching the show at different times, at what have you. But are you seeing any?
Well, that's what's weird. I've heard both. I've heard both that the show is not doing well, but then I've also seen that it's actually the second most highest rated Star Wars show behind Obi-Wan. So
see, something is
Andor was good, but Andor didn't do good in the ratings.
Well, but something should be quite clear, and that's ratings. I mean, if they were crystal clear on things and green lighting different series and episodes based on how the previous series went, they're already into nearing the end road here. They should have a pretty good idea of what their rating numbers are, you would think.
Yeah.
However that's calculated nowadays.
They're just probably not going to release them.
Well, that tells me enough right there, right? Which means if they were proud of this, they would probably be crowing from, hey, wow, this is the biggest whatever, biggest hit, biggest show we've had. But if you're not hearing that, and you're just hearing little rumblings of, well, it's the this or that, I'm not believing it until I see the numbers, and if that's the case, then I'm wondering what they're really covering up, if maybe it's not doing as well as they had hoped.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up Soul Story. So how he did not know it was OSHA when he hugs her and stuff. I just find it a little silly that he doesn't know. I mean, obviously he finds out eventually, but
you caught the little about, I don't know, 20 minutes in, I guess, the scene where they kind of give you the fake, like you think he's going to try and like overtake her or subdue her, and then he gives her a big hug, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. How did he not know her? And then he brings up again, which you mentioned, it's time to make things right. And then he says, I need to face the High Council. So obviously they're going to take it back to whatever happened on that planet. But then, he brings up, Soul's like saying, how did I not sense what's his name? And, the stranger, how did I?
Yeah, right. I was thinking the same thing.
Right. So then what's weird, he sends a distress signal, but then he turns the transponder off, and then he takes off. He leaves. So why did he leave? What's going on there? Like you said, by now, in the near the end, they should be answering questions, and it's just a little frustrating. It's like,
Yeah.
uh, and then he's all, then his basically ends with, "Let's talk about what happened 16 years ago," and then he says, "I always wondered what I would say to you if I ran into you." But I was like, "Wait a minute, you supposedly thought she was dead. What do you mean you thought for 16 years when?"
Yeah, yeah. Again, this is a poor execution on how this script was written. I thought the same thing. I'm like, am I hearing that right? I'm
Yeah,
like,
so what are they saying? Are they saying he lied about thinking she's dead, or
it,
not? You know what
these are not the questions we should be asking in the third to last episode. That's why I'm saying they just keep introducing things that just make me scratch my head. Let me ask you this though, and it wasn't crystal clear for me because I watched it and then kind of did a quick review again just for this. What was your indicator that he knew finally at some point he figured out who she was? Was it the little droid that she carried on her hip?
I think it was. I think eventually, or maybe the only thing I can think of is maybe he was just a little too up, because he was showing emotion, when he
Right.
slammed down and he was frustrated with my whole team, my whole team is dead. So it's possible he wasn't in tune with the force. So I guess that could be why he didn't. And then, like you said, the droid and just the way she's
Yeah,
acting.
I thought the perfect, because otherwise this character seems like another throwaway character. I would have brought that little furry fella in, that little beaver or whatever the heck he is. I would have had him sniff it out, literally, like say he
Well,
could
he
tell the
knew.
difference.
He
Well,
obviously knew. He fought her.
but what I'm saying, yeah, but what I'm saying is that never was conveyed to Soul, and if
Yeah,
Soul, in other words, if Soul couldn't figure this out on his own, that would have been a perfect opportunity to make that character relevant, because for now he seems to just be running all over the place screaming, and it's like, yeah, okay, so what's his purpose? It's again a wasted. I would have rather had a different character and they're doing something else. Had Yord or someone still survive and help or something like that,
yeah.
but it just again seems a little bit discombobulated. I think that would have been a perfect opportunity, but absent that, that's the only other way I could figure out he would have found out, if he didn't know already, which he should have exhibited some symptom of or sign of, yeah, I know who she is, but maybe I don't know why he would have carried that out, but
Yeah. He's playing a game or something.
yeah, I don't see that. And then like you said, when he switches the transponder off and he takes off, I'm like, okay, so what's that
Yeah,
all about?
what's going on? Yeah, why? And then it's very ominous. I need to turn myself. So something happened. We know. And
Well,
plus, here's another thing. I actually went back and looked at some of the trailers for the
yeah,
show, which I would recommend you do if you get a chance after this.
yeah,
There's a lot of stuff that they haven't shown. They show Kelnaka fighting. Uh, I think he gives that one. The Padawan who got taken over on the witch planet Brondok or whatever,
right.
and then eventually he's killed by taking the poison himself. He got a scar on his eye. I think he gives him the scar. So I don't know. Something goes off. But anyway, if you get a chance, watch the trailers. There's some stuff in there, and a little bit more stuff with Jedi Trinity, and it's like, okay, wait a minute, we haven't seen this yet.
Yeah, I guess they're saving that for the big payoff, but it's almost little too late at that point. I think you've kind of lost me. So that's why I say there were enough things in that first episode, much less the first few episodes, all along the way. There's been things that have like, wow, that piqued my interest. Like, I'd like to see more of that, or I'd like to see more about that character's background. But then they die. And then if they are going to talk about it in the last two episodes, there's just not enough time. I can only see it being a little clip here or a clip there. So again, to me, it's wasted potential for the series. Hey, to more power to those people that like it, but again, this is probably just more of a directorial decision on how things played out based on how the script was written.
Yeah,
So
that's true. Okay, well, we're near the end of our time here. I don't like to go too long, but just to wrap up Finestra's, she takes the Jedi, and they miss Soul, and they end up. I thought it was kind of cool them doing a little investigation on what happened and saying, okay, well, obviously, they were killed by lightsabers, and then she has a lot of conversation with the Jedi Jimmy Olsen, like, well, what happened? It's like, well, a powerful Jedi has fallen. And it just seems weird that he instantly went to Soul, and she's like, "Wow, that's a powerful accusation." And then, of course, she had her Jedi whip, which,
How can I forget that? Yeah, that's a good.
I thought, like, okay, it reminded me too much of what's his name from Iron Man 2 with
Uh, Whiplash. Yeah.
yeah, Whiplash. So I don't know. I can't say I hated it per se or it's dumb, but it just didn't make sense with the light. How is a light? You know,
I didn't like it. I
but
didn't like.
I didn't like it. I was like, well, that's kind of it's kind of dumb. But anyway, so yeah, okay. So that ends up her story, and then of course we ended up Soul's story with him saying, "Well, I need to tell you what happened." And then of course we end the episode with OSHA putting on the helmet, and I thought it was kind of cool that we saw he talks about Cortasis and what it does, and like I said, that is an EU medal, and it was
Right.
kind of neat. We saw it in the wall, so obviously that's where he mined it from.
Right.
But I don't know if you saw that. But then she puts the helmet on, and it's a sensory deprivation helmet. So yeah, is she gonna turn dark? We've talked about that. I don't know, but that's of course that's where the episode ends.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens in this next episode, but I just have this feeling in my gut that where I kind of think things may be headed, and obviously setting it up for a potential sequel if that's where they want to go. So,
Alrighty, Paul. Well, it's good talking to you. I was glad to get back on here. Like I said, I haven't been feeling too well this past week, but
right.
hopefully,
Well, I hope you're back on your feet sooner rather than later, and you're feeling better. And of course, that this heat subsides here in the next few days. I think that's taken its toll on everybody too.
yeah, yeah. Okay, well, you take care. I'll catch you next time.
All right. Take care now.
And for everyone else, just want to say thank you for joining me. Hit the like and subscribe button, of course. I always forget to say that. And I will see you guys next week for another episode of Jedi Business.